share with you today, and it's from this old book, and the book is titled The Lakewood Boys on the Lazy S. Now, this is typical of the adolescent novels that were popular from the 1890s, maybe even earlier than that, through the 1920s, early 1930s. This one, I believe, it's not, I don't have a date in it, but it was, I believe it's from the 1900 to 1920 era. And the whole book's exciting, but I picked out something that I thought would be particularly interesting to you here on my channel. So I'm not going to waste a whole lot of time prattling on. Let's get to the story. And it begins. Maine is a great state, the greatest in the Union. It was nearly 11:30, and the boys were sitting with Mr. Leeds on the porch of the latter's cottage. Mr. Leeds and Clara had retired, and the boys had started to take their departure, but Mr. Leeds had begged them to keep him company a while longer, and it was he who made the above statement about Maine being the greatest state in the Union. So, you don't have to tell us that, Jack assured him. And he replied, I suppose not. You see, I was born here. That is, in this state away up north in a place called Matagaman. There were only about 20 people there then, and I don't suppose there are many more now. I don't imagine you ever heard of it, though. Oh, yes, we have, although we've never been there, Jack assured him. Isn't it on the east branch of the Penobscot? It sure is. It's been nearly 30 years since I have been there. But there isn't much territory within the radius of 50 miles from the place that I didn't know back in those days. It was pretty wild country then. And for that matter, I guess it probably is now. Probably is still now. I'll bet you had a lot of adventures, Jack ventured. Well, yes, I suppose you would call them that. I owe this game leg to a bear. Oh, please, tell us about it, Jack said, and he paused. Well, if it isn't too late, and you care to hear about it, and then he broke off. It's never too late for us to hear a real bear story, Bob laughed as he hesitated. Well, at the beginning, I'll have to tell you of an old legend with the old folks that used to tell us children when we were very small. It seems that nearly 300 years ago, a small tribe of Indians had their dwelling place up near what is now called Big Machas Lake. By the way, the only thing about the lake that's big is its name, as it isn't more than a mile long. In fact, it's really nothing more than a widening of the Big Machas River. I'm sorry if some of these names I don't get right. All right, they were called the Honecutquin Indians. And it was believed that they had made their way overland from the Yukon River in Alaska, as there used to be a tribe of that name there. So I wonder if they were any relation to King Tut of Egypt, Jack interrupted. Maybe, Mr. Leeds laughed. At any rate, they were not poor relations, for according to the legend, they were possessed of almost fabulous wealth, gold and precious stones being as common as our iron and glass with us today. But where did they get them, Bob asked. Well, if there was any truth in it, they must, of course, have brought their wealth with them from far-off Alaska. But gold and jewels they had in abundance. But the pride of the tribes of the rippling water, the daughter of Mato Opagia, chief of the tribe, she must have been a wonderful girl, straight and supple, and as long as a sapling. With a wealth of raven black hair, she could outrun and outpaddle any of the braves of the tribe, so the legend ran. But one day, unbeknown to them, there appeared in the person of another young brave from another tribe. And he came, he saw, and he was conquered insofar as the maid was concerned, but alas, he did not conquer. Rippling Water's heart had for many moons been in the keeping of Wawickamug, or Mig, a young brave of her own tribe, and as she turned a deaf ear to the wooing of the stranger. Unfortunately, the strange brave, being the son of a mighty chief, had always had his own way and insisted of accepting her, instead of accepting her refusal. As a gentleman, he went away vowing his revenge. Nor was it long in coming. Before another moon had passed, a band of warriors outnumbering the the Tootie Kitten, I'm just going to call them Tooties from the first 4 letters of the name. Anyways, the Tooties many times fell upon them and wiped them from off the face of the earth. Did they kill the girl, Jack asked. Well, the legend states that she was only left alive, and that she's the only one left alive, and she was dragged away by the stranger. But it also states that she died soon after that. Often on a moonlit night, her spirit has been seen and heard bewailing the fate of her people. Did they get the gold and jewels? Bob asked. According to the legend, they did not. Then what became of it? It was hidden in a cave, and to find that cave was my mission when I met that bear I was telling you about. You'll probably think I was very foolish to take any stock in an old legend, but as a matter of fact, I had rather more than that to go on, and I was only 17. You see, about a year before, I had gotten acquainted with an old Indian who lived all by himself on the shore of Chesunicook Lake. His name was Aqua Quernuts. For real, okay? Meaning cross feathers, and it happened in this way. I was up there on a hunting trip with my father late in the fall, and we came upon an old man's cabin purely by accident and found him very sick with pneumonia. We stayed and nursed him, and he lived. He was very grateful, and he knew the following summer, while I was staying a few days with him, that he told me the legend I have told you. Now, of course, I had heard it before, but the old Indian declared that he knew it to be true, and needless to say, his words made a deep impression on my mind, especially when he assured me that he was a descendant of Wawi Kumig, who he declared had escaped the massacre. It was a few months later, during another visit, that he told me of the hidden treasure, and it seems that the knowledge of the hiding place had been handed down from one generation to another. Had he never looked for it, Bob asked as he paused. Well, he said he had not, explaining that the gold would be of no use to him. But he, insomuch as he was the last of his race, offered to take me to the place and help me recover it. You can imagine how eagerly I accepted that offer. He said, in a cave on the shore of Big Machias Lake. There was but one entrance to the cave, and that was under the water, and one had to dive and swim through it to get to the cave. No wonder it was never found, Jack declared, but Big Machias Lake is about 80 miles to the north of Chesnucook through the unbroken wilderness, and we planned to be gone 2 weeks. 20 miles a day through those woods was a good day's work, and he assured me that it would take several days to get the gold and jewels out. For 3 days, everything went well, and when we camped that night, he assured me that we would reach the lake the next day. But when I awoke the following morning, he was gone. His blanket was there on the ground beside me. So far as I could see, he had taken nothing with him, not even his rifle. At first I thought nothing of it, supposing that he had merely gone a short distance for some purpose and would soon be back. But when an hour had passed and he had not returned, I began to feel uneasy, and at the end of another hour, I started out to look for him. I didn't find him, and I never saw him again. But what happened, Bob asked. Well, that I never knew. All that day I searched, and at night I was about the most worried and tired boy that you ever saw. I never knew what became of him. Sometimes I have thought that he might have repented telling me about the hidden treasure, but inasmuch as he had already described the place so that I could hardly help finding it, I hardly think it was likely. No, I prefer to think that some wild beast killed him and dragged him off into his lair, although I confess it hardly seems possible. Well, I debated with myself until long into the night whether to go on and try to find the place myself, or to give it up and go back. And I was well versed in the forest lore and did not doubt my ability to find my way back, but finally I determined that I would try to find the lake, seeing that I was so near, and there was always the hope that the Indian would come back. So I started early in the morning and was making fairly good time in spite of hard traveling, when suddenly, after pushing through a dense clump of bushes, I came face to face with an enormous black bear. I know they say that a bear will run from a man, but this one must have been untrained in the ways of bear. and a way a bear should act when meeting a young man, for with a deep roar, she charged straight for me. Of course, she may have had a cub somewhere, and that would explain her action, but I didn't see any, and I don't believe that there was one. My rifle was strapped to my back, and she was almost on me when I got it pointed and pulled the trigger. But she didn't stop, and before I had time to fire again, she had given me a cuff with her huge paw and sent me flying end over end. But my shot had pierced her heart, and the blow was her last effort. As I picked myself up, I was conscious of an intense pain in my right hip where the bear had hit me, and to my dismay, I found that I was unable to bear any weight on it. That it was broken, I had little doubt. Now imagine my situation. To be sure, I was much nearer home than the place from which we had set out, but it was all of 40 miles away and probably closer to 50. And to the best of my knowledge, there was not a soul any nearer to me. Fortunately, I had food enough to last me for several days, so there was no danger of starving, for the present at least. But I had no water, as we did not carry any, depending on brooks and springs for our supply. It was not a cheerful situation, but I did not lose heart. I found that the only way in which I could move was to hitch along on my left side, and even so every movement caused me intense pain. But I remembered crossing a small brook about a mile back, and I was resolved to reach it if I possibly could. I suppose it was about an hour, making 100 yards, and remember, I had to drag my backpack along with me, and it was by no means a lightweight one. That journey has always been a nightmare to me, but I'm not going to worry you with the details. It was nearly dark when I finally reached the brook, and never since have I tasted anything as good as that water that day. As you can imagine, I was very tired, and in spite of the throbbing pain in my hip, I fell asleep there by the side of the stream, and it was broad daylight when I finally awoke. I knew that I was in a serious position. To reach home in my condition was plainly out of the question. It had taken me the better part of the day to cover a mile, and at that rate it would take me a month or more to reach home, and long before that my food supply would run out. Now my only hope seemed to be to remain where I was by the side of the brook and trust that some hunter would find me while I was still alive. Fortunately, I had a good supply of ammunition for my rifle, and I decided that I would fire a shot at intervals of 2 hours. The pain in my hip had now subsided to a dull ache, although every movement still gave me intense pain. So I kept as still as possible, moving only when I was obliged to. Well, it must be getting late, so I'll have to cut my story short. I was there a week before the hunters from my own town finally found me. They were 3 days getting me home, and it was another day before we could get to a doctor. He set my hip, and under the circumstances, I guess he did as good a job as was possible, but I never walked straight again. And you never went back to look for the cave, Bob asked. No, it was a long time before I could walk at all, but I told another fellow about it, and he found the cave. But there was no gold there. And did the Indian ever turn up, Jack asked. No, it's always been a mystery what became of him. Just then, as the clock in the cabin struck 1, and the boy started up with an exclamation of surprise. Gracious, I didn't know it was so late, Bob said. Thanks for the story. Come on, Jack, we must beat it. So, just a brief excerpt out of this book. The whole book is exciting. And if you have a chance to pick up a copy at an antique store or on Amazon or someplace, and you like adventures of that era, this is a good one. All right, hope you enjoyed my reading, and certainly probably not my pronunciation of the Indian names, but God bless you all. I'll see you again real soon. Love you very much on the other side of that monitor. You are all extremely important to me. See you soon.